let's make another video and let's talk about an enclosure that I'm making for a customer, client. He's got a Kicker Solo X12, 12-inch driver, and he wanted to build an enclosure for a sedan to put in the trunk of a car. So Kicker recommends a 3 cubic foot enclosure with a port tune frequency of 31 hertz. Based on the amount of space we had available and this thing we wanted to try, I convinced the customer to let us try. What we get is a net volume with this design of about 2.8 cubic feet, and I still seem to obtain what I calculate with modeling software as 31 hertz tuned. And this was modeled as a 6th order series tuned bandpass enclosure, this being the low frequency chamber and porting into the high frequency chamber. And there's essentially no port, or the entire thing is a port, which I think convolutes the design, makes it kind of a hybrid, and it's not clear to me that the modeling software is capable of giving me accurate representation here, because it is my understanding that in a design like this, the port length is increased, and we get a lower tune frequency than the simple 31 hertz that is represented if we were to cut that in half and just use that as the enclosure, or cut this section out of it. So when modeled, though, I think it gives us a high frequency tune of about 108 hertz, the way that it modeled, and the low frequency peak is about 31 hertz. Let's see here. So the reason for this design was customers going to lay one seat of the back seats down, and we're going to slide this as close to the rear back seats as possible, and this whole section is going to fire into the main cabin of the vehicle. Now, I realize that technically low base frequencies are omnidirectional, and this should be pressurizing the entire vehicle, including the trunk, sort of simultaneously. It is my personal experience that you can kind of help, and the idea here is to mitigate trunk rattle and wasted acoustical energy rattling the panels of the trunk. And so hopefully with this butted tightly up against the back seat and one of the seats folded down, this will essentially radiate into the main cabin area first, or with more, and hopefully decrease the amount of sound pressure that's generated in the trunk. If that doesn't work, we can reverse flip this enclosure, and we almost get a little bit of a horn loading effect here, right? Because we get an expansion chamber and a compression, and then that fires into the trunk, which is a little larger chamber, and then as the sound pressure radiates into the main cabin, that's an even larger chamber. So exactly what results we're going to get aren't clear to me, but I still think that this is a good design. And one of the other benefits to doing something like this is you can put stuff in the trunk and you don't have to worry about something rubbing up against the sub or the box shifting and damaging the driver. The driver's essentially protected unless, something gets into here, which it's less likely than just having a ported enclosure with the sub exposed to whatever you have in your trunk. So there's a couple of benefits to that. I have actually built this enclosure. Here it is. We went with a relatively dark wood stain. I'm not sure if it's Jacobine or something, but here it is. You can see the driver. It's dark, but you can see the driver's in there. And I've done some testing here. So just sitting in, this is like my office, but it's my bedroom as well. Rather than set up REW and do very articulate sweeps, I just played single frequencies through a frequency generator on my phone and recorded using this SPL meter. It's supposed to be good up to 120 dB, but for testing purposes, I'm running lower SPL, so we're not going for peak, just kind of trying to get a spectral analysis here. So placing my hand on the driver and leaving the amplitude the same. Let's take a look at this. This I picked up at a thrift store. This is an Infinity. I think it says SUB 750. I don't know what wattage it is, but it was a home theater 10-inch driver. Enclosure was kind of falling apart. It wasn't in that good a shape, but the amplifier more or less works. I say more or less. There's a low pass filter that the pot doesn't work on it, so I'm not entirely sure, but I can run sweeps just fine, and it seems to function okay. And even if I have subs that are wired to 1 ohm, that seems to handle it okay. Exactly how much power I get out of it, I don't know, but running the gain knob to a 1 ohm sub at about 50%, I'm getting around a 5 volt output, whatever wattage that actually ends up being. But it works for like crude testing purposes. So in an attempt to identify exactly what resonant frequency I have, if I put my hand on the driver and then I essentially run a sweep from 20 hertz up, I'm getting the least amount of excursion, having not changed any of the amplitudes or volumes, at about 27 to 28 hertz, which probably means it's tuned to about 7.5, because you get about the same amount of driver excitation at both frequencies. So let's just say 27, 28 hertz, which I get acoustical loading clear down to about 20 hertz. And the port really comes alive between 20 hertz and 27 hertz and slowly starts to decrease in the vent velocity that is observed in this region here as you go up. So let's take a look in case anybody cares. This is just sitting in my room, and the sub driver's kind of in the middle of the room. We start out fairly low with the actual SPL measurement, and as we increase in frequency, so each of these is per frequency, we quickly rise to by about 30 hertz. We're about 94 dB as measured, and by 35 hertz we're at about 100 dB, and it floats between 95 dB and 103 dB from about 30 hertz all the way up to 80 hertz, which is pretty flat. So I do measure at about 16 hertz. This thing gets really rowdy. This thing's about 12 dB hot. I mean, this thing's registering at like 118 dB, same amplitude as all of these measurements. But this high frequency tune, I do get 12 dB more at about 112 hertz. There is another peak at about 180 hertz, which is ridiculous, but it's there. I do not anticipate ever trying to have this thing crossed over that way. Based on modeling, because we get a pretty flat response, we should be able to cross this thing over somewhere between 60 and 90 hertz, and it behaved very well. And then with like cabin gain in an automotive environment, these low frequencies that are lower in dB, we should have some increase there. Yeah, so I guess my point here is that it seems to work. Everything seems to be just fine. So this has got gasket material in here that I use, and a ton of screws. And there's some bracing on the inside to help rigidify it, and then we've got another brace here. Being that that's a 2,000 watt high power 12-inch driver, will the thing flex and rattle and be problematic? I suppose there's a pretty good chance. I'm not convinced that I've got this as fortified as it should be. It might need to be double wall. It might need other fortifications. That may be a crux of this design and build, but at the moment it's finished. It looks okay. Customer's going to come by this afternoon and we're going to install it and see how it does. I won't make a video of that. I'm not trying to put people that I build boxes for on the internet. Don't want them stealing what tiny little bit of spotlight I might get someday. Not that I'm trying to be famous, just that was a joke. It was a very poorly landed joke. Yeah, I'm still posting this video on YouTube because this is kind of a neat enclosure that we built, and I think the design is interesting, and I don't know, modeling it, looking at it here in the room, it seems to perform. Once we get it in the vehicle and can get it tuned, we can decide, does this rattle, does it play the frequencies that are desired? I don't know. Guess we'll find out. One of those situations where modeling something on your computer and then real world, this has a tuning frequency that's 27.5 hertz, and it modeled at 31. So real world and modeled definitely different. This, in my opinion, has shifted in my favor. I would prefer to have a lower tuning frequency than, because the lower the frequency you go, the higher your excursion ends up being, or being needing to be in order to achieve low frequencies. So if you tune low, then you are able to decrease your cone excursion and let the enclosure make all of your noise, and you're able to play louder at lower frequencies without making the cone jump out of the basket too bad. So I think that's a good thing. Going from a 31 predicted hertz tuning frequency to 27, we should, in the automotive application, we should be able to play this thing down in the low 20s, and it should really do work. So I'm kind of excited about that. Cool. That video is that. Man, I tell you what, I've sat here and attempted to make this video 10 times, and I swear I only get worse and worse. And it's like, why on earth would I post any of this online? I have no idea. I'm trying so hard to be eloquent, but as soon as I hit record, it's like my IQ points drop by 30 points. I don't know what to do about that. I suppose that might be somewhat universal, and so even moderately intelligent people are far more intelligent off camera, off screen. And so the people that we enjoy and watch who are very intelligent, it's like maybe that is where their intelligence lies, is their ability to be eloquent while the camera's rolling. But I, for one, feel like I just utterly fall apart. Anyway, here we are. Moving on.